Good evening. Good evening. My name is Susan Boyer. I'm the facilitator for the Charter Review Committee meeting this evening. And we'd like to begin with, Madam Clerk, if you would call the roll, please.
Yes. Member Fuselier?
Present.
Member Hathaway?
Here.
Member Eisen?
Here.
Member Palmer?
Here.
Member Poole?
Here.
Member Rashidat?
Here.
Member Rokier?
Here.
Member Smith?
Here.
Member Wilson?
There.
Member Billings stated he would be late today, and Judy Riker has an excused absence. We have our Assistant City Attorney here that will address the committee.
Just as a brief reminder, I know we have a few folks that are new this evening and one who arrived a little bit late last time. This meeting and all the other future meetings are subject to public records as well as the Sunshine Law. I know you're all very well familiar with it. We do have a section under tab 8 for your reference. And in addition, if you have any questions, please feel free to stop by after the meeting. Any questions you may have. Thank you.
All right, so the first thing on the agenda for this evening is approval of the minutes. I would look for a motion.
I make a motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion.
I abstain. I abstain as I was not at the last meeting.
All righty, thank you. Got that? All right. So before we head into the preliminary discussion this evening for the proposed charter amendments, there are a couple of items that I think we need to probably bring up just to get us kind of all back to the same page. I have heard from several of you, committee members and some of the public, in relation to where you would like to see public participation on the agenda. Right now, public participation is at the end of the agenda. I know some people wanted to see it at the beginning. So I think that's one of the first things I'd like us to clear up this evening. And I leave that up to the committee for discussion. I have no personal preference or recommendation whether you do it at the beginning or the end of the discussions. Every committee does it a little bit differently, so.
City Commission has the public participation at the very beginning. Did you hear that? The City Commission meeting has public participation at the beginning of the meeting. I think that's fine for myself.
I agree with that.
I prefer the beginning of the meeting as well.
And the last review committee had public participation in the beginning and the end, which is kind of time consuming. But given the choice, I'd much prefer the beginning, just because people read the agenda and they come here to express their opinion of what's going to take place this evening.
Yeah, I agree also, because I think it gives an opportunity for us to hear their positions or concerns against the agenda items, as opposed to hearing from them at the end.
That's correct. Also, there's nothing worse than having to sit through an entire meeting if you don't really care about most of it to say what you say. And so having it at the beginning maybe will give people a little bit more of an opportunity to come to the meeting, and then they can leave when they're done.
Okay, great. Then I think what I'm hearing, Madam Clerk, is they would like to have public participation moved to the beginning of the agenda. And would you like to do that this evening? Would you like to start there this evening?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Then I would say, let's see. Well, before I do my other comments, why don't we just start with that? Well, I'll come back to my comments. I have a couple other things, but if we would like to take public participation now, we can do so. Anybody from the public sitting out there would like to speak? Come on up.
Set for the committee. As the meeting was to be an organizational meeting, I didn't expect to see specific revisions made to the charter. I thought, being the person I am, that you would just go through each section and it would be discussed, and you would have time to come back and, after listening to the citizens, then make your decision about voting. I think more time should be given to the committee before voting on the changes so that you can hear from the citizens. The charter review is a big deal. I don't think it should be rushed through. I think the current charter must be adhered to as written until the changes are made. The 2020 review was done after decades of no reviews, and it stated a review to be held in 2026 and every 10 years thereafter. After last meeting, which I had watched, I scanned the current charter, and Section 703 states that a review shall be held in 2026 and every 10 years thereafter. This is not 2026. If we're to abide by our charter, how can we make the changes in 2025? Seems like this would throw off the 20-year schedule as well. The charter represents the rules we are governed by. Are we not breaking our own rules? This change also would require a special election for the charter changes to be voted on by the citizens. The election would be extra cost to the city, and I'm thinking that the previous review committee was planning on 2026 election cycle so that there would not have to be a special election. I may be totally off base on all of this, but these are my thoughts. And if I'm out of line and I misinterpret, I certainly apologize, and I appreciate you guys giving your time because, as I said, this is a big deal. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else who would like to speak?
Good evening, Randy Herman, 108 Esther Street. Is there a fire? There's smoke everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, not that it should affect this proceedings, but I thought, what's going on? I'd just like to build on what Ms. Dugas just said, and that is, I wrote this to your consultant, I hope when you come to each item that you state the reason it is in the current charter, the rationale, and that you state the pros and cons for changing so that in 2030 or whenever this is next reviewed, that group will benefit by your logic and rationale. I think that will really carry things forward for the city because some of us probably won't be here in 2030. I hope so, but I hope you can do that because I think it will really make your deliberations more meaningful. Thank you very much.
Good evening. I'm Karen Francis, 261 Minorca Beach Way. I'm puzzled. I don't understand why we're conducting this charter review in 2025, as the previous speaker mentioned. I'm not aware of any urgent issues for this year. The current charter allows for a review in 2026. By conducting the review in 2025, I assume this will mean a special election this year. I would like to know what cost that will incur, rather than waiting and combining with the standard election in 2026. We have to be prudent. We have to be good stewards of our city's money. And I don't see any reason why it's happening this year rather than in 2026. Additionally, can you please confirm the role of the city clerk as a charter officer? I'm hearing different things, and I'd like clarification on that point, please. So hopefully somebody will get to me, if you're not going to answer now. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, PJ Arvidsson, 1314 South Riverside. How are you doing? Ms. Dugas said just about everything I want to say, and she said it so much better. And the other gentle lady there said, what's the rush? What's the hurry? But on the street, what I've heard is this whole charter business is so the mayor doesn't have to run a second term this term. If we can get it passed in 2025, he's good for 4 years. Is that the main reason for this changes? That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Any other public comments? All right. Hearing none, let's move on to a couple of other items that I have on my list here. One of the things that we talked about was from the last meeting, you all had asked for information on what elected officials were paid along the east coast of Florida. In your packet, you have a spreadsheet on that came from the Florida League of Cities. It shows what they're making. It's actually shocking. Some of the littler cities pay more than the big cities. But anyway, very interesting. That is just an informational item that you all had asked about. We are still waiting to see what the legislature is going to do with that. We just had a conversation about it. They haven't made any, well, they've changed some things, but they really haven't made any forward progress, so to speak. So we still don't know what the outcome of that is going to be. So hold that information in your back pocket. It may come up again, or it may be told to us what we're going to do. So we'll have to wait and see. And any questions on that particular spreadsheet, though? It was pretty enlightening, though, when you take a look at it to see.
I just want to make note and let everybody understand this is 2021 data, so it's 4 years old.
Correct. And they should probably, by the time we get to this and we know what the legislature is going to do, the league will have done an update. And they've got 3 years worth of data. They've had their own issues, so they haven't compiled it where they can sort it for us. But as soon as they can, they'll provide it to us there as well.
Online.
So, the other item that I have here is so let me see here. Hold on. We already moved that. So one of the things I've talked with several of the committee members about this past week was there has been a lot of questions on what did they do in 2020, you know, why'd we do that, questions along those lines. Yeah, I can't answer that. I wasn't here, some of you weren't here. We can't really answer that with any great surety. So one of the things that I've talked with several of you about is that we could do a spreadsheet, basically, you know, with some columns on it. Here's the item that we're talking about, here's what we want to change, and here are some of the reasons why we're going to change it. Pretty simple little spreadsheet. Oh yeah, sorry. Pretty simple little spreadsheet that has maybe 3 or 4 columns to it. You know, what we're looking to change, what the section is, why we're looking to change it, and what the rationale was, why you all are putting that recommendation forward. I'm happy to put that together. It would be, you know, obviously a week behind, you know, our meetings, but we would have that, and then in the end, you would have that basically for historical purposes going forward. If none of you are around and somebody wants to ask the question, they would at least have, you know, besides the minutes, they'd have a really quick and easy reference document to look at on why the changes were made. So I know several of you might like to talk about that. Mike?
Yes, I think it's a good idea because once we got the red line documents from 2020, and by the way, thank you. There was a lot of work done on the last charter. It really needed it. But unfortunately, we just don't know the why. So, and that is a long time ago now. We're today looking forward instead of in the rear view. So I think it would be important for the why, and a Word document with boxes or a spreadsheet, whatever method that's easier for Sharon to record on. But ultimately, the why, the intent and the why, I think is really important, especially if we got to wait 10 years for another charter review, then they'll understand because what we decide and all approve will make total sense and it'll be the right thing to do. But 10 years from now, they're going to go, why did they do that? Well, here's the why. And that way it's all together. And then we can use that to share our information out to our citizens of the city. Here's what we're doing. This is the why. So that's why I recommended that.
Yeah, and I think that the why is very important, so that's a great idea, you know, in terms of how we document that and pass that on. I'm also concerned with the how. So as we're in, you know, this kind of a forum, how are we going to make decisions? You know, there was actually votes that were done last week that never had any discussion. It was simply a matter of 8 or 9 people giving their personal opinion and then moving to a vote. So I'm really concerned with how will we do the how, right? How are we going to collaborate? How are we going to look at, these topics and have an open dialogue about this and come to a conclusion rather than just have opinions. And one thing that I had an idea on is, the simple whiteboard approach, which I use in my business all the time. How can we use something like that, through this system to be able to say, here's the opinions and here's what came out, and then how do we actually dive down deep into what does those opinions mean and make a decision. So I think that's an important thing for us to figure out how to do.
I tend to agree with you, and I like your suggestion for us putting something forward to the facilitator so that she can produce a worksheet, because I could see that worksheet become the work plan for the rest of our meetings. And I think if we look at it, each of us come here probably with some specific idea. We put that out, lay it out with the rationale, and then include in that what it might look like if it got changed. I know some recommended language, not necessarily legalese, but at least describing what you want to try to accomplish with that. Then take that and set that up against the next couple of meetings out so that we take, depending on how complex the requests are, we take one or two of those a night, discuss them, come to the table prepared with whatever materials you want to do for and against, come to some conclusion and then consensus, and then have the city attorney give us a draft back. I think that's the best way to set it out, and that way would be clearly in the agenda each time. We're going to talk about X tonight, so come prepared for X.
I'm trying to understand, because the last couple of items that we discussed and voted on, we had discussions on the dais, and each one had their own opinion on it. So if that wasn't sufficient, what is sufficient?
What I'm not.
I'm saying if that wasn't sufficient, the discussion we had among all of us at the last meeting, what is sufficient? If that wasn't sufficient, what is sufficient?
Oh, okay. What I'm talking about is more of a planning for the meetings than a resolution.
And I know, Palmer, I'm talking about Dan here, because Dan was saying that we did not discuss.
Yeah, we didn't.
I thought we did. I thought we had a discussion. I heard some comments from some people up here as to why they thought that was a change. But I'm looking for something that lets me come to the meeting prepared against a specific item as opposed to just having a discussion. I heard the same thing you heard, Khaled. I was comfortable with the discussion.
Yeah, and that's what I'm trying to find out. I mean, I'm trying to find out the way that we are going to vote on an item. So if the discussion at that meeting was not sufficient, then I need to know what is the responsibilities of us in order to vote on an item. I mean, that's what I'm looking for.
Yeah, Khaled, and I would love to answer that. And I think some of the comments from the audience, stated, we've got to look at the pros and cons of both sides of a discussion. So last week, everybody gave an opinion, right? We didn't go back and challenge those opinions and discuss. So for instance, just on the mayor's term from 2 to 4 years, I've got a document that I put together that I'd be happy to share. And it just went through, what are the discussion points for a 4-year term? What were the discussion points for a 2-year term? And one of them was the city incurs added cost by having the mayor election every 2 years. Well, I'd like to know, what is that added cost, right? How much more does it cost for us to have that mayor term on the ballot every 2 years instead of 4 years, from an incremental cost standpoint? And, so I just want to have a point where we can, the whiteboard approach, put the pros and cons and talk openly and make some decisions and move together, rather than just be 8 people or 9 or 10 or 11 presenting an opinion and then having a vote. And I do think it's very important. I read back through the notes, and back in the 3rd meeting of 2020, right back in the minutes before, a guy named Fred Cleveland stood up in front of the commission and said, hey, it's really important for you guys to look at both sides of the issues and really talk about why you're doing this and how you're going to come to that decision. So I thought that was very insightful at that point and something that we should do right now.
So there's an election every 2 years, whether the mayor's on it or not. We
Correct.
have staggered terms, so I think
Right.
additional cost would be nothing.
Exactly. So that's one of the points but somebody raised that
Sure.
as one of the arguments last week. Hey, the city's incurring added costs. My feeling is we're not incurring added costs because there's already an election, and that incremental part of the ballot is
And I think
Nothing.
one of the things we brought up the last time, and I know I mentioned it because this has always been the discussion that I have heard the contrary argument to doing a 4-year term is this, the whole purpose of having the 2-year term for the mayor is that every 2 years, the citizens can throw out the majority of the commission.
Right?
Changing that to 4 years takes away that ability of the citizenry. I think that's probably the strongest argument to not do it.
And I think it's even more than that. And this is the discussion that I want to have when we get to this point in the agenda again, is for everybody to be able to look at what we talked about last time and then have an open discussion. Because building on that, you know, we have the opportunity to vote out a mayor every 2 years. All right. And right now, we're very fortunate, right? The city's lucky. We've got a mayor with high favorability that's doing a great job. But what I'm concerned about is if we take away this ability for the electorate to make decisions, we're taking away our ability to make a change in the future, because sometime in the future, we're going to have a mayor that we're not happy with. All right, so now's not the time to be changing from a 4-year or 2-year term to a 4-year. We need to protect that, unless there's compelling reasons to make the difference. And again, I'm sorry, Khaled, I don't want to make this discussion now, but these are the kind of discussions that we need to have.
I think it's important. I think what I mentioned at the last meeting, when I voted for the 4-year term, our form of government in the city of New Smyrna Beach, the mayor equals is equal a commissioner. The only difference is he presides over the meeting. So it's a ceremonial position. So if that's the case for 2 years, why don't you do a 2-year for a commissioner? It's almost the same thing.
Yep, and
If
that's...
you have a strong mayor, I would agree with you. I mean, that's my discussion at the time when I said about the pros for having a 4-year term for the mayor. The other thing is for a mayor when they come in. I worked with 7 mayors, and none of them really had the 2 years not enough for them to do the goals and the accomplishment they're trying to do. Same thing for the commissioners. So when you have a 4-year commissioner, it takes them almost, I would say, between a year to 2 years just to get into the system. Sure. So, I mean, that's why the pros and cons that I had on the 4-year.
Great. So this is the pros and cons discussion that we need to have come to, not just opinions. So I'm glad that we're starting to do this, and we need to find a way to do this, you know, on each item, right? Because you've got some comments on it being a ceremonial position. I'm not so sure that it really is a ceremonial position. Otherwise, there wouldn't be a section in our charter that says duties and responsibilities of the mayor. There's a specific section that outlines why that position is different than the other positions. And Susan, I don't want to debate this now because we're talking process. So let's move on to how can we create a process that fosters this kind of collaboration?
Well, I think you all have had a good conversation. Now, obviously, the conversation you're having now is one of our agenda items tonight. So I think we need to hold the rest of the conversation until we get to this item. But I think you've illustrated what the committee is looking for. I mean, I think I'm watching the heads move up there saying, yeah, okay, we want to have more discussion. Perfectly fine. We can do some more discussion. But I think for now, I think everybody's in agreement where you want to go.
Back to process.
Yes.
And in support of what he's saying here. Now, he's got his pros and cons that he's listed out. So what I'm looking for in order to set the scene for the discussion when we take it up is that's his issue he wants to address, that he submits that to you, and then you distribute it back to us. So we all come to the table understanding where everybody is from and what the pros and cons, and then we can take each of those and accept or reject.
Well, I'm not sure I'm going to get written information and comments from every single person, but I think everybody has the opportunity when we're here having the meeting to express whatever their opinions are. And I think a lot of people will, it's hard until you start hearing each other speak about what your pros and cons are. It may change people's opinions. They may come in with one opinion and then hear others speak and change their mind. So I'm not sure, I understand where you're coming from, Mr. Wilson, but I'm not sure that will always be the case for everybody, you know.
Well,
but we could try something.
Well, some of us may not have a specific area. Some of us may be looking generally at the charter. Others may have an area of the charter that we're interested in, and we'd like to get it out on the table for discussion. So from those folks who have that, a simple memo to you that says, you know, here's an area I'd like to look at, and here's the reasons why I want to do that, and here's the areas that I think of that larger section or specifics that need to be highlighted. then you can take that, it would help you program out by looking at it and saying, well, you know, Cowards sends in something, and that may only be a half-hour discussion, but Palmer sends something, and that's going to be a whole meeting discussion. That lets you plan out your meetings, where you want to go, and then we can have a cogent discussion of each of us understanding where the rest are, and then we can debate it. That's what I'm looking for. That's the only thing. I'm not suggesting that you publish the discussion in advance. I'm just suggesting that you publish an agenda item, and here's some of the issues that were brought up regarding that, the pluses and minuses from the group, and let's discuss it. You don't even have to say who submitted it. Just give us an idea of what has generated that interest.
All right. Any other comments from anybody?
Regarding the process, or? Yeah,
Regarding the process, yeah.
So I do want to bring something up, and before we get into actually, section 3 here. And it was brought up by a couple of the, public participants, but after last week's, or 2 weeks ago meeting, that very next morning I sat and I thoroughly read the charter through, read it through several times, and I got to section 7.03, and I really do think that it deserves a reading here for all us to make sure, in case everybody hasn't seen it, right, but at least to read it and make sure that we understand what's going on. All right, so I'm just going to read, section 7.03 of the current charter, which was adopted and voted in 2020, November. There shall be a periodic review of this charter by the Charter Review Advisory Committee, which is us, appointed by the City Commission in 2026 and every 10 years thereafter. So each zone of the city shall have representation on the committee. So we've got the representation, but I still have that question of why are we doing this now in 2026 and not in 2025? So why are we doing it in 2025 and not in 2026 as is written in the charter? And the charter was, reviewed by the City Commission and voted on by the electorate. So my two concerns are, from a legality standpoint, are we breaking the charter by doing this in 2025? And then number two, are we breaking the trust that we have with the electorate in doing this sooner?
Well, I think the city attorney probably could answer the question a little bit better, but when you read a shall language, it means, to me, and full disclosure, I'm a lawyer, so I'm so sorry in advance. Shall means you shall do it by 2026. There's nothing in the charter that says the city can't bring it earlier.
Shall, I looked up shall as well from a legal standpoint. I'm an engineer, I'm not a lawyer,
Yeah,
right? But
smarter move.
But shall is a very strong word.
Yeah.
And it says they shall create the committee in 2026. The wording doesn't say shall create it by 2026, it says in 2026.
But
and I'm a stickler for words and details, so that's why it really jumped out at me.
It doesn't prohibit the commission from convening the charter committee earlier, and that's what they've done, which is why we're here, because the elected body has chosen to do it this year.
I think it's also important to know that the last time this was approved or reviewed was 2020, which makes 2025 5 years. So I think that's part of the rationale, that is 2025 gives you, it's been there for 5 years. Take a look and see if anything else needs to be done. That's what I took from it.
Yeah, and I was also in both of the commission meetings where this was discussed, as part of the public. And the section 7.03 was never read. It never said anything about 2026 or in 2026. The whole discussion with the commission was based on, hey, we had this review back in 2020, and we were going to take a look at it after 5 or 6 years, right? So nobody looked and specifically read the language, and I think language is important, so I'd like to really understand, the impact of this, so.
Any other comments or questions on that issue?
Do we know if the intent behind that clause was to say that the review, was it to get the review done and completed so that it could be on the 2026 ballot? Because if that is the case, then starting in 2025, partway through the year, would be the appropriate time, right? By the time you get everything settled, you get it through the commission, you get it onto the ballot.
Do we know what the intent was for the 2025 review that we're doing?
I would have to defer to the city attorney. I have no way of knowing. I read the minutes, but it doesn't give me any clue in there, so.
Right, there's nothing that precludes the commission from calling this committee sooner, and that's what they did via that resolution. to call for this to happen now. There's nothing that would preclude it from happening again in 26, 27, 28, any year that the city commission puts forth a resolution, which was adopted unanimously, to start the charter review now.
And here we are.
That's not the answer I think you were looking for, Dan, but does that answer your question?
It's the answer that I was looking for because I just wanted to make sure that everybody here was aware of it. You know, I still have deep concerns over this, especially in terms of how it's perceived by the public, and especially by the fact that the last meeting had a very strong rush to judgment. Okay, how can we get this done in time for a special election? You know, we talked about the agenda and the timing through August, and people commented, can't we get this done sooner? Do we have enough time to have a special election? And my concern is, why do we need a special election? We've got a great charter, right? And we're going to talk about special election later on, right? But we have a great charter. You know, as Susan said, we're not tying horses up on the streets, right? So what is the necessity for us to be pushing forward so quickly? And I'm just concerned that it creates the perception of there being an agenda that's trying to be achieved, and for what reason.
So I'll speak to a couple of those things, and I absolutely appreciate those comments, 100%. I think several of the people that were appointed to this board, and I know them, their backgrounds, we're not coming into this with a blank slate. I mean, these aren't ideas that we just came up with overnight. I mean, I've run for office in this circuit a couple times, unfortunately, and I'm very bad at it, I'll tell you that. But these aren't new ideas for me. I mean, I've lived some of these things, and I don't come to this table completely foreign to these discussions. These aren't new. I mean, I've known Mr. Rashadat since he worked for the city when I was born. These are discussions that have taken place beyond this, before we even knew there was going to be a charter review committee. I had no idea I was going to be serving on this, and if you had told me I was 2 years ago, I'd say, yeah, I'm sure. But there are some things in the charter that are very, very good. There are a lot of things that took place in 2020 that were very, very good. There are a lot of things in 2020, I think, that based on the discussion last week, a lot of people agree were not that great and have impacted the city in a negative way. I don't think we came up here in a rush to change anything. I think there's just some very common sense things that people agree on. And I have no qualms about delaying it, slowing it down, talking more about it. Absolutely. Let's talk until everybody's very comfortable. But I don't want it to seem like we're all here, we've got it all decided, we all met in the back and came up with this plan. No, that's not what happened. There are a lot of us that have been involved in city government. Judy Riker was the vice mayor and commissioner for many years. A lot of people up here have been involved with local government, coming to meetings. Mr. Wilson's run for office. He's been around longer. He's been running for office too, since I think back in 2012, or even before then. So it's not like we're coming to the dais completely absent-minded. The first time I read the charter was not before this meeting. I mean, I've read this charter many times going into it. So I absolutely appreciate the necessity for contemplation and more discussion, and I welcome it. But some of these things I think are fairly obvious.
Anybody else want to speak to this particular item? Okay, I think we've about beat that horse. So I think you're good?
Sure.
Okay, all right. I don't have anything else, so let's move on to the very first item under Section 4, Charter Discussion. The first item on there is the discussion of the special election. I've reached the age where I can't see you guys
So we're
without
skipping
my
section
glasses on,
3
but I
and go to section 4?
Section 4.
We need to review the city attorney's adjustments from the last meeting.
Oh, yeah, I skipped that. I'm sorry.
Well, do we
See,
want
I've
to
reached the
slow
age
down?
where I can't see all of you unless I have my glasses on, and I take them, and I can't read with them on, so I just on and off thing. So, all right, so therefore, I missed that. Sorry, we're looking at 3A.
Well, do we want to push 3A until after we've discussed 4?
Well, I definitely want to push 3A out, until we have so that we can have that discussion. It makes sense. But I just wanted to make sure everybody was comfortable with skipping to 4. I'd much rather talk about 4.
I think 4 implicates 3 quite a bit, and 4 probably is one of the biggest decisions we probably need to make, our timing. I think that's.
Correct, I agree with you 100%.
So my attitude would be we should talk about 4 first.
Well, you just want to take them out of order? I mean, because the first one for under 3A is going to be Article 2, which is the city commission.
Yeah, so 3A is basically the proposed charter revisions, which we really didn't have a full, agreement on last week, and that's basically getting into the 2-year term versus the 4-year term, and that needs a lot more discussion and work.
Well, in the applicability, do we want, as a committee, do we want our changes to go before the voters to be effective for the 26 election, or do we want it to be effective on a special election, so it would be not effective until the 2028 election?
Correct.
I think that's a huge discussion that we probably need to, if we're not on the same page on that, let's get on the same page on which we want.
Well, okay, so do we want to go ahead and start as it's laid out here and start with the city commission in section 2.2, composition and creation of the commission? You have from the city attorney, you see her lined changes as it relates to terms of office. So I think that is the first discussion.
I think she crossed off 2 and put in 4.
That is correct.
So.
Is that still, that was the discussion last time, was to change it from 2 to 4.
That was the discussion that had a very premature vote before it had time for discussion. So we do need to,
So I think we start there. Let's have that discussion. Let's try and weed this out. So we've got the lined, basically the red line document from the city attorney, looking at changing the language to change it from 2 years to 4-year terms. Obviously, the composition of the commission isn't changing, but the terms are. You see that in section 2.02, and then over in, that's basically the 2 sections there, 2.02. Oh, I'm sorry, that's basically section 2.02. So I'm going to open it up to the floor for discussion. Are we still wanting to go from 2-year terms to 4-year terms?
Well, let me ask a question. And maybe I'm reading this markup incorrectly, but the copy I have still shows a 2-year term. Am I wrong?
Go to the agenda.
The revisions below it.
If you go to the agenda.
It says a term of 2 years. Highlighted right there.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry.
But look down below.
Yeah.
Go to the agenda, Palmer.
Oh, okay, thank you. My error, I was reading it wrong. Okay. I was looking for the correction up top, but I got it. All right,
Okay.
I'm good.
So as it is redlined here, is that the pleasure of the group? Or are you all rethinking your position?
Well, once again, the group hasn't discussed this situation. Everybody formed an opinion, and I'm looking for some sort of a way for us to facilitate a discussion on what was actually said and come to alignment on it. So, I'd be happy to start and take my approach to it unless somebody else has a better approach. All right? And maybe just for a simple point of discussion, I've created a 1-page document with the reasons for a 4-year term, the reasons for a 2-year term. And I think this would be a great way for all of us to have a conversation about what's important. So if you wouldn't mind me passing this on, it's just one format of having a discussion. Okay. Palmer, would you mind passing one of these down to, you ready? And Kat, I'll let you pass these on.
Be sure you pass a copy down to the clerk.
Read one more. I gave one to Sharon.
Perfect.
Let me take my copy back then.
And for the benefit of the folks that are listening at home and are in the audience, you're going to read it, I presume?
I am going to read it, yes. All right, and Spencer and team, all I did here was there was a lot of opinions that were based last week, or 2 weeks ago. So there were opinions and discussions for a 4-year term and discussions for a 2-year term. So basically the pros of each. And all I've done, and in this kind of an exercise, there's no wrong input, there's no wrong item. This is simply a whiteboard exercise based upon what we've all said last week and our opinions. And now we'll have the chance to really dig down deeper into what does that mean. So the first bullet point under a 4-year term, With a 2-year term, the mayor is constantly campaigning, and that time could be better used actually governing the city. I don't know who said that, but does that make sense, and does everybody recall that being said as
Yes.
a valid reason for a 4-year term?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So I'm just going to read through first, and then we'll come back and have a chance to discuss that. All right. Second bullet point, the city incurs added cost by having the mayoral election every 2 years. Do people remember that being said?
Yes.
It was said.
All of
Okay.
these were said.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just reading it for the benefit of the audience and so that we can facilitate a discussion. If you want to just move forward to discussion, I'd be happy to do that.
No, keep going. I think not everybody sees it.
Okay.
People listen.
I would
So,
recommend
so it
reading
was
it.
said the city incurs added cost by having the mayoral election every 2 years. Some people said that's not true, and I agree that's not true, which is why I want to have the discussion and move away from opinions to facts. Okay? The next bullet point, campaigning every 2 years is a financial burden for the mayor.
Yes.
That was said, right?
Yes.
So we'll come back to that, and we'll see, is it true? Is it really a financial cost to the mayor? Or is it those costs borne by, political donations and so forth, which is all public records?
It's both.
So it's both, okay? The mayor's role is equivalent to other city commissioners, except for some ceremonial duties. And since the city commissioners have a 4-year term, the mayor should as well. That's a comment that was made. I'm sorry?
I disagree with that.
I disagree with that as well.
Although it was
Now,
said.
however,
But it was said.
that's what I want to,
It was
see,
said.
this is the point I want to get to, is how do we say what was said, which are opinions, and now build this into a collaborative discussion. So thank you very much. That's the kind of point I want to get across. And then, obviously, what additional discussion? What are other pros for having a 4-year term?
I think one thing we discussed, Dan, was that it's difficult for the mayor to get anything done when he starts developing his relationships with city staff, et cetera, in 2 years.
Yeah.
And I think we all talked about that, correct? So I think that's one thing that should be added to that left side.
Very good. I agree.
I got one too. We use the term ceremonial, but in reality, he's responsible for running the city commission meetings.
And I said that.
Yeah, I think somebody mentioned that the other day. So he has an additional responsibility. Toss into that in many cases, he has more external responsibilities where he's actually going to specific meetings or representing the city at a specific event. As opposed to, while commissioners go to some meetings too, the mayor tends to go to more of them than the commissioners do. So there's an added factor too in terms of the scope of his employment.
I mean, I was referring when I said, as I worked with commissioners and mayors, the terms of power for the commission, for the commissioner and the mayor, they're equal.
And Khaled, I'd love to come back to that. So for right now, I just wanted to list the pros
Absolutely.
on
No,
the
but I'm just
4-year.
referring to his comment.
But you're very right. I mean, this is the discussion I want to have. Is this really a ceremonial role, or is there more to that mayor's role that would, allow for that differentiation in terms?
If the mayor has more power in voting, I would agree with what you said, but to me is the mayor has 1 vote and the commissioner has 1 vote.
Okay, so we'll come back to that then as we get it.
I
And
have
then,
another one for the left side. I think the 4-year term would allow, I don't know if the best description is better continuity, or it would just get both staff and residents out of the mode of feeling like they're always getting somebody new up to speed on changeover, right?
Sure.
So I think that's
improves continuity.
yes.
Did we mention that, maybe it's in here somewhere, did we mention the fact that having 1 vote like the other 4 puts him on a balance with the same weight of a vote as a commissioner does?
What do you mean, Palmer?
I mean, in terms of the fact that he runs the meeting, but he ends up, when they make policy decisions, he votes and he has 1 vote. So his vote could swing a 3-2 vote, just like any commissioner could swing a 3-2 vote. So there's an equality of weight of vote that would infer there should be an equality in length of term.
Sure.
And I think to add on the left side column, stability, I think, is something we should flesh out, because if you talk about what we've seen I don't know if anybody's been watching the news lately, but there's several local cities, and I won't name names because it's not polite, that the mayor has come out and stepped beyond what his or her role is in some of our neighboring cities. And it's caused some bad press, let's say, for the city, which contributes to a lack of confidence in the government. It makes it seem like we are, that city, I won't say which one or which ones, may have a dearth of leadership, or it may look like they're an amateurish group. And that hurts when you're trying to recruit a new city manager. It hurts when you're trying to recruit a new city chief of police or city attorney or city clerk. So that's one piece, I think, that having a stable mayor for a longer period of time is good. That can also be a negative if, like you say, we don't have the mayor that maybe the city deserves at the time, which can happen. And frankly, I think another piece that I would like to throw in that left-hand column is what's often described as the bully pulpit. The mayor is less likely to take on controversial issues if the mayor's the first one to face the electorate. And if the citizens are not happy with things that are happening in the city that may not be the mayor's sole responsibility, they're going to take it out on the mayor, simply because he is the face of the city. Now, that also could be a column for both sides.
Yep.
And some people say that's exactly what we want. We want to take out the leader and the face of the city when things aren't going the way we want. But it also means that that person is less likely to take on the more difficult questions if they know that they might be thrown out in 2 years. The 2-year term, I can tell you from personal experience, is a detractor from people running for that position. I know several qualified people that I've spoken to over the years, over many years, people that would have been phenomenal mayors that said, I can't stand up to this every 2 years. I can't go through this process every 2 years. It's not an easy job. Being the mayor is a very, very thankless job. You get calls literally 24 hours a day. Somebody didn't pick up my garbage. This police officer pulled me over and I didn't like the way he talked to me. You're a piece of garbage. They leave flaming stuff on your doorstep. I mean, I've lived this. It is terrible. And to say that you have to go through that process every 2 years, it takes a really special kind of character for somebody to stand up and say, yeah, I'll sign up for that for $20,000 a year. It's a tough job, but somebody that really loves this city and somebody that really wants to give back and somebody that is qualified to do it, I think merits 4 years. And I think that's worthy of discussion. And some of the things I've said, I think could cut both ways. And I can, what I do for a living, I could take either side and argue either side, and we could go back and forth on it.
All right, then come over to my side for a second here, Spencer.
Absolutely. Sorry, I keep talking. I will not shut up to cut me off.
So on the right side of the page here, I just listed discussions for a 2-year term, right? And clearly there's a historical precedence. The staggered 4-year commission terms versus the 2-year mayor's terms allow for a majority of the commission to be voted out in a given election. And that's the historical, preference here and why that was there. But I really took that one step further, right? So keeping the 2-year term really gives the electorate that right to make a change and make a vote. And again, I really want to emphasize, we're at a great part of our city's history where we've got a mayor with a super high approval rating, 1 and 2 landslide victories in the last couple of elections. So I'm not concerned about his ability to win again and what he's doing. And this isn't about the current mayor. This is about the opportunities that we have, as an electorate to make a change, because there will come a time in the future where we're going to have a mayor who's not as popular, right? Who hasn't built the relationships with city and staff, who's not working well with the electorate, and you want to have, voted out of office. So we're definitely, as you move from 2 years to 4 years, you're taking something away from the residents, right? And a power that they have. So I'd really like to understand, what do we gain with the 4-year term? And now would be the time for anybody else to build on to what are other good reasons for having the 2-year term that I may have missed, because they were really glanced over in the last meeting.
Sure. I'm sorry, and I don't want to talk about this, but I just want to say historically, and it is an interesting fact, and I just want to throw this out there. Going back to 1978, there's only been 2 mayors that were voted out after that were voted out, and both of them served more than 1 term. Every other mayor served multiple terms, and almost all of them stepped down. There was only 2 mayors in the last 50 years that were voted out of office. Going back to Mayor Musson. Mayor Musson died in office. Mayor Vandergrift was voted out. Mayor Mackay was voted out. Mayor Behringer did not run again. Mayor Owen didn't run again. Mayor Hathaway didn't run again. So there has never been in recent history a mayor that was thrown out after 2 years. But I think, again, that could be on either column. There goes to head, but they are constantly running for re-election. I think to me that makes more sense to say, well, just give them the 4 years anyway. because they're not going to tackle the major issues in their first 2 years because they know they got to run in 2 years. But for discussion, now I'll shut up for a while.
I would kind of add to that, too. I understand where you're coming from with the ability to vote out, but there's no guarantee that's going to happen, okay? And the chances are, at least as long as I've lived around here watching the commission, you really don't see majority changes.
Right.
I've never seen 3 of them get voted out at one election. You tend to maybe see 1, maybe 2, but usually it's 1. So I think that while it's theoretically correct, I'm not sure that in reality it really happens.
Mr. Palmer, were you, this, Palmer and Palmer, first name, last name.
Yeah, last name, first name. You know, I thought that we did discuss all that stuff that you said we should discuss again. I thought we did. That's what I was going to say. We're reiterating the same things we discussed previously concerning these. Now, the fact that you wrote them down, I really, really appreciate, and I think it's a big deal to do.
I do too.
Well,
Yeah.
all I've done is write down what people said
That's
last time.
absolutely right. So,
We never debated
yeah.
and discussed each of the items. I think that's, if this is the list and everybody agrees with this list, now we should have that discussion. So, you know, I'd like to understand the second bullet point. Somebody had said the city incurs costs for having the mayor election every 2 years. What does that cost? That was said as one of the reasons to move to a 2-year term is it's going to save the city money.
I've heard that I know that the city has an election anyway every 2 years, so I'm not sure whether or not there's an increase in cost if the mayor is included in that election. I don't know.
I don't remember the comment, but I think maybe it was about the special election.
No. Now, somebody said that the city is incurring an extra cost by having the mayor elected every 2 years.
Yeah, that was probably some, yeah.
I thought that was in reference to the primary versus general
Right,
conversation.
that's correct.
Yeah.
No, same situation, primary versus general. Is there an added cost to the city in that
There is,
case?
if
Because you're still
the
having
mayor wins in
having
the
a ballot.
primary, you don't need to have a general. There's a lot of times there isn't a general election in local elections if there's 3 versus 2. It happens, but yeah, I
Right.
think that was the conversation.
But if you had to move to the runoff election, what's the incremental cost for that?
Well, if we were the only thing on the ballot and the person who got 50% plus one won in the primary, there'd be no need to have a general election.
Correct, and that's another thing that's coming up, but, okay.
I think that was the discussion where the cost savings discussion
Okay.
happened. That was my recollection. I could be wrong.
No, you are correct, Spencer. That's when we talked about that.
Okay. A lot of discussion over the mayor's role being equivalent to other city commissioners except for ceremonial duties. Does everybody believe that the mayor's role is equivalent to the other commissions except for ceremonial?
For the most part.
I mean,
Sorry, could you speak in the
For the most
microphone?
part, sorry.
When I said ceremonial,
Khalid,
Presides
can
over-
you speak into the mic? We can't hear you.
presides over the city commission meeting. Represent the city going into different events, different boards. But that's going on behalf of the commission. So if the commission decides that they want the mayor to go, I mean, they could do that. You have the vice mayor. Vice mayor acts on behalf of the commission when the mayor is out. So do we say, okay, let's have the vice mayor for 2 years as well? To me, it's a ceremonial position. If the mayor has more votes or a stronger vote than the commissioner, then I would agree with you. But to me, it's both, they're equal.
Khaled, let me ask you a question. When you were city manager, I read city manager reports all the time, and it'll say that the mayor and the city manager attended. Did you predominantly, if you were going to these meetings with somebody, was it predominantly the mayor, or would it be balanced out with the commissioners?
Most of the meetings that you saw on that report, it's we go, and mostly they're mayors from different city and some other commissioners as well. I mean, everybody could attend.
Yeah.
But that's specific meetings, like, for example, take the roundtable,
Right.
Chicago roundtable. I mean, it's the mayors and also the county council and city managers and anybody else who could attend the meeting. Even the public could attend the meeting. So it wasn't just the mayors and the city managers, but it was wide open to the public. Anybody could attend.
Well, I get that, but what I'm saying is, in your experience, did it tend to be the mayor more than a city commissioner?
Yeah, that's what I said.
Yeah,
I mean, the
okay.
mayor goes into a lot of events, a lot of meetings, but I'm talking about when the mayor sits on the dais, he doesn't have more power than the commissioner.
I
Oh, I
agree with
agree.
you completely. When the mayor sits in the dais, he doesn't have more power. But the mayor is the face of city government, right? There's a section in our charter, section 2.13, powers and functions of the mayor, that spells out the added responsibilities and functions that the mayor has. And if it really is true that it's just a ceremonial role, why wouldn't we have that mayor role rotate amongst the 5 commissioners and use that rotating form of government?
Because that's the way the election is.
I'm sorry?
That's the way the election is.
The way
The election is you elect for a mayor. I mean, that's the way that the form of government has. Now, there are some other cities have a strong mayor. That one, I agree with you. That's one the mayor has, like, for example, the mayor of Orlando. That's a full-time job. It's the mayor has more power than the commissioners.
You know, I think as a society, we, you know, as humans, as social beings, we want a leader. And it's a natural thing, I think, for one person to be the leader, and I think that's why this system works as well as it does. My question to Khalid would be, after all the mayors that you've worked with, have you ever seen or been in a situation where the mayor was able to influence the commissioners?
I have not seen it, to be honest with you. I have not seen it. I mean, every commission that I worked with, they all have their own opinion. They listen to each other. Depends of, you know, how they value the opinion of the other ones, but...
Well, that's been my experience as well, but since you've been so involved with it, it's a unique perspective that we have here in this group.
But believe me, everybody have their own opinion. I mean, I remember going to the briefings and I get 5 opinions.
Right.
I mean, it's a normal process.
I think to answer maybe Dan's question is, you do have some cities out there where they pass the gavel every year, or maybe not, maybe the same person keeps the gavel, but the commission themselves elect their mayor, who's going to act as that ceremonial person. And then you've got what you have here in New Smyrna is probably the most common, where the people elect the mayor. But you do have that other option out there.
Colin, I agree with a lot what you said, but not everything. The mayor does have more duties and responsibilities outside this diocese. He does the state of the city. That he's required to do that by charter. So there's lots of things that he does outside of that in a leadership role for the city. So I think a mayor is important, and I think we always strive to have the best mayor we can. And I agree with Spencer in the fact that if you start if these 2-year terms, you're going to lose good people that can't fight the fight every 2 years to do the campaigning and ask for the money to finance a campaign. You said, where's it coming? Well, there's donors, but trust me, every mayor in this city has gone out of their pocket to pay for lots of things.
Sure.
Okay, so I don't think that's really a fair question, but there it is.
But I don't want my comments to be misunderstood. I didn't say that the mayor does not have responsibilities. I didn't say that.
You said on the diocese. I got it.
What I said is it's an important position. I was talking about the power on the dais. The mayor has more responsibilities than any other commissioner. There is nobody disagree with that. The power on the
You
dais.
said the mayor has more responsibility than any other commissioner.
Yeah,
Okay.
more responsibility. Sure. Now, when they are on the dais, they're equal. That's
And I
what
agree that on the dais they're equal. So my whole point of this conversation, and I'm very glad that we're digging in and having this discussion, because the fact that the mayor's role is equivalent to other city commissioners, except for ceremonial roles, therefore they should have the same 4-year term, I don't buy that as a valid reason on the left, and that's why I want to have that discussion. However, it is worth to discuss, would you attract more candidates and higher quality and different mayoral candidates if it were a 4-year term? That becomes a valid discussion point onto the left.
And I believe it does.
But that's entirely different than saying that
No,
it should be a
I'm
4-year
saying-
term because it's equal to the other
I'm saying
commissioners.
that's another item to be added.
Thanks for
Any-
forcing that issue, man. Appreciate it. It's good discussion. Absolutely.
Any other discussion? So, you've had your discussion now. What do you want to do about the language as it's rewritten, that the city attorney is, we're back to 2-year, 4-year terms for the mayor?
I'd just add, from a procedural standpoint, you can decide as a group to vote tonight at the next meeting or save all of this for the final meeting. That's why you guys are here, to have these productive conversations, but to decide as a group how you want to run these meetings. Just because you have the language tonight, that's not an indication that you have to vote tonight. You can table this for the follow-on meeting or even continue it, like I said, and have all the proposed language throughout the entire charter and just vote on one final night if that's what you decide to do as a charter committee.
Yeah, that makes sense, and, we can decide together what we want to do. Just procedurally again here, we're going to recommend a revised charter, which is then going to go to the commission and then go to the electorate. Will that revised charter be a one and done? This is the whole charter, or will it be a series of amendments or referendums that we would say, item 2.02, increase the mayor's term, item 2.3, or whatever the next one is?
They'll all be individual items. It won't be this one huge document given to the
Because in
public.
2020, it was a huge document that was passed on to the electorate for a vote, and they voted on one document.
Yeah, but
So
then
that's
if it
just wanna
doesn't
be
pass, you
clear.
throw the baby out with the bathwater.
I'm sorry?
I prefer them be individual items because.
But
So would
again,
I.
this
Yeah.
committee can make
I
that
remember that it
decision.
was a summary of each item that we voted on. Is that wrong?
No, it was one.
don't know.
Was it
It was
one
one document that was voted on, and as a new charter.
And I think we talked about it briefly last time, but we did talk about it, that we have to be cognizant of the fact of, depending on what election cycle this is going to be on, that if we have an individual vote on every change we make to this charter, and let's say there's 7, then our voters are going to have a 20-page ballot. And that, to me, is, I think it's an abrogation of our responsibility. The citizens elected the commission appointed us to make a determination. We put it to the citizens and make them make a decision on every line item. Half the stuff's going to be undervotes. Most people won't vote on it at all because they're not going to understand some of these discussions. A lot of folks, there's 5 people here. There might be 100 at home listening.
But they're going to understand a 22-page document that is a city charter, and they're going to understand what's different about that city charter versus the current charter. I think we owe it to the citizens to be transparent, all right, and say, here are the changes that we're proposing to make. And there's probably going to be 5 or 6 changes that we're proposing, right? We're not going to rehash all the wording because that was done really well in 2020. This is going to come down to more to what are these 4 or 5 salient issues, right, that the commission wants to bring forward.
I hope you're right.
No, we're not going to rewrite they did a great job of that in the past.
I think you're probably right, but I don't think that's a decision you have to make tonight, whether it's we give the voters the whole document or we give them 5 individual items, because we don't really know how many items we're going to have just yet. I think you're probably right. It'll probably be half a dozen, maybe at the most, but we don't know that yet. I think all we really need to focus on right now is that the language that's being proposed for change, is that the language you all want to see? Does that encompass the recommendation of the committee? Let's get those figured out first. What are the things we want to see first?
While we're in this section, I have something else I'd like to discuss, if we can. I know we've been talking about the term, obviously, beat it to death. But at the bottom where we talk about the mayor and each commissioner shall be elected by a majority of those qualified electors voting in a citywide election. I know that there are some cities that do it differently, where the commissioners that are elected by their zones only. And I'd like to know why we chose citywide for the commissioners in previous years. I'm just kind of curious, and if there was thought to doing it by zone, and then the mayor kind of at large citywide.
And that, I tend to agree with you on that. That was a question in my mind all along anyway. Most cities that I'm familiar with vote that way, whether they're aldermen or commissioners or council members or whatever they are. They're usually voted upon by their constituents as opposed to everybody. It also goes to the merit of the cost that we mentioned with the repeated elections. That means that somebody who's running in Zone 1 is going to have to go campaign in all 4 zones of the city. as well as distribute his materials in all 4 zones and his signs and everything else that goes along with elections. So I tend to agree that I think we ought to discuss that and determine, because it is part of this particular section.
I'm not saying I'm for or against it, I just would like to have a discussion to see what everybody else's thoughts are on it.
Daytona's zone-based, the city of Daytona.
So is Ormond, I think.
I think that's probably right. And my experience with the people that I know, several people that serve on both of those commissions, it promotes fractionalism. I think it promotes what's in the best interest of just my neighborhood, and it's not a city approach. I can understand the counter argument as to why it is that way, because that's what you have, but then you get a lot of not in my backyards, you get a lot of that doesn't help zone 3, so I'm not going to vote for it. Where's my equivalent? Where's my city park that I don't have in zone 2? And it becomes fractured, and I think it leads to a less congeniality. I think it leads to less of a city forward mentality. I personally, my opinion would be adamantly against changing from at-large to district-based.
All right, that's good insight. Thank you. Anybody else?
And in this section, would this be where you'd talk about term limits, if anybody wanted to have term limits implemented?
Well, wait,
Yeah,
wait, let's finish this thought. Let's finish the one that Diana brought up there.
Oh, okay.
No, I mean, I appreciate what Spencer had to say on the topic. I hadn't quite looked at it from that perspective. And after hearing what he had to say, I'm happy with the verbiage as it is.
Yeah, I think the financial cost to do that and the time constraints to go to every zone independently, that would be challenging.
Well, that's what they do now.
Yeah, I think what she's saying is that only people in Zone 4 would vote for the Zone 4 commissioner. Only people in Zone 2 would vote for the Zone 2 commissioner, instead of having it be a citywide election. And again, I can see both sides there, because you're going to want someone in Zone 4 who's going to represent the needs of the people in Zone 4, but likewise, you want to have that city forward approach.
Right.
So, but that's still something that's worthwhile to discuss and see if we want to do.
But I'm not hearing any interest from the group, majority of the group wanting to pursue that. Is that correct?
I don't think I want to now after I heard what Spencer had to say.
Okay, all right, then that kind of dies right there.
Yep.
So, all right, will you bring something else up?
And then you
Dan?
have a term limit. So, is that something that would go into this section in 2.02, or would that go somewhere else? Because I know people in some people that ran in the last election had a strong position for term limits. I'm not sure what my position is yet, but I think that's something that commissioners had run on and is worthy of discussion from the folks here. And is this the place to put it?
It is.
Well, I think that would be in section 3.06, wouldn't it?
That's what it is.
Where it talks about when term of office commences.
And I'm sure everybody's tired of hearing me talk, but
That's the term. It's not term limits.
every-
It's the number of terms.
every 2 years we have a term limits. They're called elections. People don't like them, they can throw them out. I think term limits tend to empower bureaucracy. And we were just discussing this previously about the legislature. And if anybody's been to Tallahassee as of late, you can talk to your representative who's been there in the backbencher that was just elected, and they have zero input because staff's running the show. Because staff will be there when they're gone. Staff was there before they got there. You tend to make the city manager the most important person in the city in that point. And then if you have term limits, you get 3 people on at the same time that have no experience whatsoever. And the first thing they want is, we want to change the direction of the city. We're going to fire everybody.
Yeah, and I'm not saying it needs to be 2
Sure.
terms. I'm saying some form of term limits, because that's a big concern with, the Congress. And we've had people that have been on our commission for 3 or 4 terms, some who have run unopposed in the past. So I think this is kind of a time to bring that up. So again, I don't know if it's in this section, or, Susan, you might have another area that would want to bring that up.
Well, we can have it now. We can always figure it out where it would go, but
Something that jumps to my mind when it comes to a term limit discussion is that when it comes to, say, for example, a congressman or someone in legislature, they may be wanting to stay in that position for a long time to develop personal wealth and power. Whereas in a mayoral position in a small town, That's certainly not the case. They're not going to get that. So I see a real distinction between those offices when it comes to term limits.
I think you also have to look at, our commission doesn't have a staff, really. There's city staff that's in departments, but nobody has a administrative aide per se secular, unlike the county council who does have that. And as you move up, you get more staff. So I think you have to look at it that the term limits, I've always been a term limits person at the national level. I'm not sure it really applies here. It's a good discussion, but I'm not sure I could support it.
And interestingly enough, you bring up the county council, they have term limits, and their staff is the most important piece of that pie. So,
Yeah.
and so does the legislature.
But there are arguments for it. I mean, there are rationales behind it that somebody gets too solidified in there and they lose contact or they lose understanding and so forth. I think we've been pretty much, as long as I've been here, there's been some turnover, but there's been some people, current count staff, for example, there's one commissioner who's been on there a long time. I don't know how many terms, I think maybe 3, 4, can't remember, but 3, I think. So there's pros and cons to it, I think, but I'm not sure it has applicability to here.
You know, I could speak about our city. That's what we're talking about here.
Thank you.
The city is really, I mean, you look at for the past 35 years that I've seen commission come and go. I mean, if the citizens, they feel like they need to get one commissioner or a mayor out, they got them out.
Yeah.
If that's the case, doesn't happen, then I would agree in the term limits. Now, one of the pros for having I guess, no terms or no term limits on the commission, that has some stability. Not only that, but for a small city like this, sometimes what happens is you run out of qualified candidates, to be honest with you. So.
Yeah, and Spencer, I think you talked to that it's tough to get people to run. I know there's been some initiatives in recent years to get certain commissioners out of here, and I know for a fact that it was tough to find people who were interested in doing that. So I tend to agree with you, Kellett. I think that's accurate in terms of getting there. And I think for the most part, because the city, we do this vote that's across the city, then there's an opportunity for people across the city to remove a commissioner in more context than it would be. And I go back to this last election, and we did lose a commissioner, but the vote for that particular seat, as I recall, was not real high. It wasn't, as opposed to the election itself had a big turnout, but the vote for that seat was not high. So we get back to interest, and I'd like to drop back again to the comment about how we're going to get this approved. I'm opposed to this all or nothing vote, and I'll tell you that right now. It needs to be by each individual change that we make. And there was a public meeting on this, or a commission meeting, I don't recall which, last time in 2020, and there was a lot of folks there that spoke against it. But it was obvious that Mayor Owen was hell-bent to have it done all or nothing. And he convinced the rest of the commission to go that route. But there was a lot of people there that said, no, we want to vote. And I think the problem with that vote was that it was too big. Yeah. Most people aren't going to read all of that. Most people in this city don't even know what's in the charter. So if we can just spell out to them and say, look, here's the changes, here's what it looked like before, and here's the changes, and here's why, and do some good PR with that so people understand and can make their own decision, I think it's far more beneficial than trying to get somebody to read the whole thing. And look at me, I read these things all the time, and I made a mistake. reading this thing, because I was looking for the strikeouts and the underlines, which Spencer deals with all day long, right? So that's what I was looking for, and I didn't see it, but it's there. So I think that's what the key is. So I would just, in our discussions about that, I could encourage you more to do it individually. And I don't think there's going to be that many changes.
And I have a question for the attorney. If we recommend to the commission that it be broken down by individual or a bulk, they still have the ability to say, no, we're going to send it to the citizens as one.
That's correct.
Okay, so this is essentially a recommendation to the city
Yes,
commission.
correct, it is. And that's what happened the last time.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is a lot of things, but I think what I'm hearing from you all is that the term limits is not something you're interested in pursuing. Is that the consensus of the group? Okay.
Do you want a motion for the approval of this particular language right here for this section?
Well, that's what I'm going to go back to. So what we didn't finalize or vote upon was the very first thing that we started the discussion with, which was on the, whether it's a 2-year or 4-year term.
Right.
And that changed language on there.
And again, so the assistant city attorney, you had commented that we don't need to do that vote now. We can do that at the next meeting if we wanted to, or we could save all the recommendations to the very end to make that kind of a vote. I just want to better understand what those options are.
Yes, that's correct. It's your meeting, it's your decisions in terms of how you run this, as long as we're meeting the basic requirements of the law. You guys can take a look at this. I want to vote on this 3 meetings from now because I think there's other conversations we need to have. That's up to you as a deliberative body to make that decision in terms of when you vote on these. And it may work out better in some instances so that we're not trying to go back and look at something that we already voted on. Somebody's changed their mind. But again, that's for you guys to think about individually, have the conversation that's been going very well tonight, and then make that decision as a group in terms of how you want to vote on matters.
I would recommend that we go do the other sections that are related to the mayor and the issues and complete that and come back and vote at that particular area at one time.
And my suggestion is, I don't like to wait to the end to vote on all these items, because then what happens is you forget the discussions. I think it needs to be within certain time that the discussion is still fresh in our mind as well.
I agree with that. I think if we have consensus, then let's take the consensus when we have it. And I agree. I will not remember all of the salient points that everybody made tonight 4 meetings from now. I'm smart, I think, but I'm not that smart. And I think if we've got a group that agrees on the language, then let's take what we've agreed on and move on to the next thing, would be my opinion.
I would agree with that. The problem is, we get too far down the line, we forget the discussion we had tonight. You've got a lot of hot items to talk about.
I agree.
So I would recommend you go ahead and take your vote tonight. It doesn't mean we can't revisit it, but, I think if we begin to, that goes back to that chart that we talked about earlier, that I that Michael talked about, is we can begin to develop that chart. You'll be able to see why some of the reasons are we have what we have on the list. I think that will make things clearer down the road.
Well, for clarity, and maybe I wasn't clear, I was only talking about this section here with the term and then the corollary section of how the primary versus the general is then. That's all I was talking about, of taking those two, because they both impact on the term, one, the term of the mayor, and second, how we do the election, whether it's the mayor or the commissioners. I'm not including the clerk and the other stuff. I'm just,
No.
That's what I meant by, let's do both of them and then come back and vote.
So let's do section 3.05.
I'm sorry?
So are you referring to section 3.05? You want to do that one in conjunction with this one and then
Yeah.
vote on them together?
Yes, yes.
Is that okay with everybody?
So,
Well, there's still going to be 2 separate votes. We're just going to go through this discussion on the primary election first, right?
so do you need more discussions on this item?
I don't need more discussion. But it's up to you guys in terms of if you want to vote now or if you want to vote after there's more discussions like Palmer suggested.
I think from experience, not with charter committee, obviously, but with other stuff, I think it's better to vote when it's fresh in your mind and the discussions on the dais. I mean, that's just my opinion. I mean, somebody have somebody different opinion.
I agree. In fact, I think I would move to approve the language as drafted right now.
All right, do you want to make that as a motion, Spencer? And specifically, which sections are you speaking
To
to?
amend the mayor's term from 2 to 4 years.
I second.
Section 2.02.
So going from 2 years to 4 years?
Yes.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Who seconded that?
All of them?
It was stereo.
It was a stereo, yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know, I'm writing down whoever the clerk wrote down. Who did you write down, Sharon?
Palmer Wilson.
Okay. Okay, all those in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 You want to take a roll?
Yeah,
Why
I'll
don't we
take
the roll, please?
Yes,
Oh,
I'll call
take a
roll,
roll.
yes.
Okay.
Member Fusilier,
Aye.
Member Hathaway,
Yes.
Member Ison,
Yes.
Member Palmer,
Yes.
Member Poole,
Yes.
Member Rashidat,
Yes.
Member Rokier,
No.
Member Smith,
Yes.
Member Wilson.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, so the motion passes 10 to 1. All right. All right,
213, is that the next one?
pardon me?
It's,
So are we, do we have our order number of which, the next one?
Well, we have, I didn't hear you yet.
What's the next piece that the attorney had drafted for our consideration? What was
Oh,
the
well,
next
you
item?
got, the next thing is the election section, which is Article 3, the elections.
I just want to make a correction. It was 8 to 1. You said 9 to 1.
Oh,
It
I
was
said
8 to
9,
1.
oh, it's 8 to 1. Oh, I can't count. Thank you. I counted you guys. I just kept going. All right, so the next part is is in section, well, Article 3, elections, section 3.05.
Did you say 305?
Yes. Well, actually, I take that back. No, never mind. Because we voted on Article 2, City Commission, Section 2.02, that was language cleanup. And then Section 2. The other part of Section 2.02 was composition and term of office. That's the one you all just voted on.
Okay.
Going to from 2-year to 4-year terms. So the next section is, like I said, Article 3, the elections, the nomination and election process. Cleans it up a little bit.
Actually, I think we need to go back briefly to 2.02. The language in our packets has an effective date of the November 2026 election. Am I reading that correctly?
Yes.
That is
should be
correct.
correct.
Well,
No, it would not be correct. That
We,
would only
this
be
is
correct if you have
a special election.
Correct.
Because there's no way it would make it to the ballot to the people and then to be effective that election day.
There's no way it would make it to the ballot by when?
If we have a special election, it could be effective November 2026, but if we don't have a special election, there's no way this takes
So
effect.
that was kind of presumptive then
That's-
for that language to say effective on 2026 because we haven't approved a special election.
We haven't had the discussion about whether we should do it effective this
So
first.
I think for now it should say effective on 2028.
Or should we have the discussion about whether we have a special election or not?
I think you should have the discussion whether you have a special election,
Okay.
whether you're going to recommend a special election or not.
And that was the point I was trying to make at the beginning. If
Yeah.
all these things might affect us,
They are linked together.
we should probably decide as a group, do we want this to be a special election or do we want this to take effect? Because it would be 2028. I mean, it would have to be. If we pass it for the ballot for two readings for the commission, it would be placed on the general elect, or the whatever primary election or general election for 2026. The citizenry would vote, and then it would take effect in 2028, unless we have the special election
Why couldn't
this
it
year.
take effect in 2026?
Because it would be on the ballot in
You'd be
2026.
voting on, does
on
the
the
electorate
ballot.
want a 2-year term or a 4-year term?
Correct.
It'll be on the
It
ballot,
would
you
not go
wouldn't-
on until the 28 ballot unless you hold a special election.
Which is really the driving force behind getting this done now,
Wouldn't go on until 28.
right?
Which goes into the discussion of the costs associated with it. I think that was in the materials and.
And I think now that the lights come on, I think this is, why it's so important. Why are we doing this in 2025 versus 2026? That's what creates the perception that there's agenda behind this in order to have this be effective in the 2026 election instead of the 2028 election. And that was one of my concerns right in the very, very beginning, and why I made such a big discussion on section 7.03.
And then the alternative to that would be if we had the conversation in 2026, it wouldn't be effective to the 2030 election.
No, it would be effective in 2028.
Depending on when it was put on the general election.
Right.
If you got the language done in time for 2 readings and then the city election
If-
26.
If it was voted through as positive in November 2026, then it would still be 2 years for the mayor's term, and then the 2028 election would be a 4-year term.
Depending on what the terms were and depending on how quickly the group, whoever it would be in 26, in this hypothetical situation.
Okay.
Because even if we go on our timeline this year, which we talked about in the first meeting, even if we follow that timeline, we probably won't have enough time to get it on a special election in 2025 if we wait till August. There's no way we're going to get 2 readings this year, and there's no way we can get it to the
Get 2
supervisor.
readings and get it posted on the city
Right.
website. Pros and cons of both opportunities for people to build up their opinions before the election. Otherwise, you're just trying to slide it through as one big document.
Which is why I think that discussion probably should be the very first discussion we have. Do we want this to be a special election, or do we want it to be on 26?
Amen.
Okay. We can do that.
What's everybody's pleasure?
You can see the wheels moving, everybody's thinking, so
Yeah.
which way they want to go. So,
I'm saying special election
special election when?
This year.
this
This
year.
year.
And
Absolutely.
the cost, I think, and somebody can refresh me,
It's
look
about
at it.
$48,000.
$48,000 what I seem to come up with, if I
Yeah.
recall.
The city attorney at a previous commission meeting, she said she thought it would be about 40, so 48's in the ballpark.
That's like buying a new truck for the fire department.
Pickup truck.
Wait, half of a truck for the fire department.
Yeah.
I haven't bought a new truck in a while, sorry.
I was going to say it's going to be a funny-looking fire truck. It's going to be missing part of it.
Yeah, maybe
Yeah,
it's
not a fire truck, pickup truck, even a pickup truck, but it seems expedience should be the overriding factor here. I mean, if we're gonna do this, let's do it and get it done.
Yeah, I tend to share that same thought, mainly because in 26, you'll have the mayor and 2 commissioners being elected. The unfortunate part about us backing a special election will be that there will be some people that think that it's being done because of a hidden agenda, and it's not really that. It's to get it in place to facilitate that 2026 in time for that election. So I can see
Or to
either
not
way.
delay it till
Or not
2028.
delay it.
You're right.
That comes
That's a
back to what
long
I said
time.
earlier, the why. As long as we have the why, that's rational decisions and conversations, as long as we share
Right.
the why, then people can make their own decision, is that a good why or a bad why?
There's also 2 backstops, the city commission themselves and then the people. So if they think there's a agenda behind this, then the commission can vote it
stop it.
down.
Yeah.
And if the
Yeah.
people think there's an agenda behind it, they can vote it down. And they
True.
have shown us time and time again, they're not afraid to express
They
their
will.
opinion.
Yeah,
Yep.
there's a plus to the special election, that you're not competing with all the other items on the ballot, which could include state constitutional amendments and everything else. This would allow people to vote for a specific item and have the ability to only concentrate on those. So there's a plus there for it.
But the
Excellent point,
disadvantage to
yeah.
special elections is that the turnout is very, very low. It will take a lot of work to get a good number of people to actually go to the polls.
And that's my biggest question here is the special election is going to cost $48,000. So the first thing I'm going to ask is, well, it's not half of a truck. It's $48,000. And what's our return on investment for that? What are we getting? And what I'm hearing is we're not saving a lot in terms of less elections because it's already on the ballot. So I really want to understand that savings that we get by driving the special election now. But my biggest concern is what is the voter turnout in a special election? I mean, I looked up today, Volusia County election, participation for the last 2 elections. We had 80% turnout, 81.6% turnout in the last election, which is phenomenal for Volusia County. That's great. The primary had 23.8%. All right, big difference. And this is important for us to talk about later on as well. How many people will actually vote on a special election, which I believe is going to be a mail ballot? So there'll be a ballot that's mailed out to people?
Only if they request it.
I'm sorry?
Only if they request it.
No, the special election. I mean, how would you handle a special election? I thought it was by ballot.
No.
By mail.
No, it's a regular
You go to
election.
an election poll?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
all
yeah.
right.
So
Well,
there'll
again,
be-
so what's the turnout in a special election?
Well, the one they just had in Ormond, the turnout wasn't huge, but there was a lot of work that went into getting people out to the polls. So it's going to be on the city, since this would be specifically about the city, to generate enough interest and enough reason for them to get out and vote or order a vote by mail ballot.
So does anybody have any experience in terms of what the turnout is in a special in an off-year special election?
Typically, it's between 10 and 12%.
Yeah, it's
So
not
10 and
very high.
12% of our citizenry is going to make the decision on this.
Mhm.
That's one of my biggest
But-
concerns about a special election.
But the thing about special elections and early voting is the people that will turn out during those elections are your super voters. So they're the people that are going to vote all the time. They take the time to educate themselves on whatever they're voting on. So they're good, high-quality voters.
And
But-
turnout doesn't necessarily reflect how many are voting. Remember, there's going to be, if you have an 80% turnout, and which is a presidential year. I mean, we're talking about, it was a pretty big presidential year.
And the year before was 55.1%.
Yeah, which is
is
about half.
still a lot bigger than 10.
Sure, but look at the undervotes for the city elections. What was the turnout for people that voted for their district commissioner? I bet you it was half that. And so the people that are voting for those positions are still your super voters. And so to me, I tend to favor an off-year election for local government because I want the people that come to the meetings. I want the people that listen online. Those are the people I want picking the city commission. I don't want it to be, oh, he told me he has an R next to his name, or he told me he has a D next to his name. I'm voting down
Or
the ticket.
just tell me what to do.
Yeah. Somebody handed me a flyer as I walked in, so I'm picking that slate. I've not researched. I don't even know these people. To me, and this is my opinion, I'm one of 9 votes. My opinion is I want the super voters making that determination. And to me, a special election in this situation with a technical deal, I think those are the people we need making those decisions. And then it might be beneficial to have it broken down. This is at least when we're going to get really thoughtful participation from people
Yes.
that know what we're talking about.
And if you look at the way a general election ballot is set up, you got to get through all the federal, state, and then you meander into all these judges that half the people don't even know who they are. And then they get to the commissioners, and then on the very last page of the ballot, here's this monstrous piece of document. By that time, the voters just either going to not vote, or they're just going to vote against it because they're tired of voting. So when you do the special election and you have it specifically for these charter, remember, this is a charter change. This is not changing an LDR or an ordinance. This is a charter change. And it's incumbent upon the city and the other folks that are interested to get the word out, to educate pros and cons, and to get an election to do it. And I think the special election will allow the focus, and people can walk away. They've had a chance to vote, and they either vote or they don't vote, one of the two.
And I could tell you this, I think it's having the charter on the election, which a lot of people they're interested in. I think it's going to be the percentage of voters, I think it's going to be higher than the normal, just a normal special election. That's number one. Number two, I agree with Palmer. I mean, when I go for voting and then you see all these amendments that's in the back, I mean, it's like 5, 6 pages. Now, depending on what we do with this, I mean, I would rather have it on a special election to give some people chance to read and understand. I mean, still the city has to do an outreach in terms, I don't think they could support it either way, but they need to do, a good outreach in terms of, having the pros and cons and the, the frequently asked questions on it. But I think I agree with the group in terms of the special election. I really do.
And this is nothing against Khaled, but this city spends a lot of money foolishly. So we can certainly afford to take a special election, given a lot of the other money that gets dumped one way or the other.
And I don't think that's a valid reason for having a special election.
It's
because
an
we're,
observation.
because we're wasting money somewhere else.
It's an observation.
I think,
It's a drop in the bucket.
but I think, what is the return for that drop in the bucket?
Well, I don't know.
For that
That's what we're-
$48,000,
that's
what are
we're
we
discussing.
returning back?
It just seems like it to me. I'm not versed in this, honestly. I just thought I'd bring it up. I thought that if I said yes, we need to have a special election, that would start the conversation, and it did. So I'm just sitting back and listening to you guys. The guys that know about all this stuff.
And we don't know what the rate of return is going to be until we know what the changes are yet.
But it does seem like it would be that expedience would be the thing that should be the overriding factor here. We're going to make these decisions. We're going to make these changes. Let's go ahead and get it done.
And my personal opinion is I think the city residents of New Smyrna Beach should have a special election because for all those reasons, they're important. This is an important city. They should have a say-so. And if there's a ballot specifically for the city and not county and not state and not judges they don't know, I think that's really important. I think that.
Okay, so good discussion. So do we have a motion? Because right now in section 2.02, composition of term of office, it says that the election will be held November of 2026. Do you wish to change that to a special election?
Well, that's just saying when the next election cycle is, and we don't even need to make a recommendation on a special election. That's up to the commission. I mean, we don't need to recommend this. They need to decide if they want to do it when our recommendations get to them.
Well, the question's going to become and I think maybe Madam Clerk can answer this question. When does the supervisor of elections need the language if they want to have the option of doing a special election this year?
It'll be 90 days after the second reading.
90 days after the second reading, the commission does not meet in July. Our last meeting is scheduled
The
for,
commission does meet July this year. Their break is in June. Break is in June this year, and they meet in July. They changed it up.
okay. So when would, Mr. Attorney, how long for 2 readings if we finish on our schedule, which I think was, what was the last date? August
something, 20.
Middle August.
I'm trying to do some mental math in my head. 90 days after second reading. There's no way it makes it on a special election this year. What would be the drop dead date if we wanted to give the commission the option to make it a special election?
The supervisor of elections said 90 days from second reading.
So
When is
Let's
that?
back up. So
Just a
election
minute.
would be November. Back up 90 days from November is going to put you in July. July, August, but it'd be August 1st.
For special elections.
Correct.
Special election is 90 days after the second reading. So if you guys decide to have a special election, then it'll go for commission for 2 readings and then 90 days from there.
But I think where you two aren't communicating is there is no date determined. It's 90 days from the last reading. So it doesn't
Right.
have to
So-
be
so-
November the
so-
4th
so-
or whatever.
So if we finish, say, middle of August here, that means 2 readings with the commission would take you till
End of September.
end of September.
And then
which
90
puts you
days.
90 days after that puts you end of the year.
Oh, sorry, it's been a long day. I forgot. A special election doesn't have a specific date. It would be special. That's the whole point. Sorry, it's been a very long day.
Yeah, that's what you guys were, yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
No problem. So, I mean, if it was December the 2nd, or whatever day it could be that day. It doesn't have to be that November date. It'll be 90 days.
So we have time, just.
I wouldn't be real keen on recommending getting the commission to do a special election in December. I think that would be a problem. I think we should probably set a date ourselves so that we can say, we want to send this to the commission by X date, so that if they choose they want to have a special election, that we can get it to the voters in a reasonable time frame. Typically, it's November, and I think they like November because that's, I think, when
that's
most people are
election
here.
Well, let me ask this question. I know we're scheduled to August, okay? And we've already talked about a couple of things that have come up, and there's probably going to be a couple more. do we really think it's going to last August? I mean, there's no mandate that we have to drag this thing out to August, but is it conceivable? And I don't know the answer. Is it conceivable that we could finish earlier?
I think it is. It depends on, how we go on the other items and get them done. But you don't have, I mean, there is no sticking point that you have to go to August. If you finish before that, then you're fine.
I have a question. What if we're real close? Do we have to follow it every 2 weeks, or could we have a out of cycle the following week for a meeting?
At a meeting?
I mean, if we're really close to the end, I'm just asking that question. Is that
It all
appropriate?
It all depends on everybody's availability. I think we could have a special meeting, we could, but that all depends on
Yeah.
if we're all
All right,
available.
well, you answered my question. Okay, good. All right. I just, understanding our options.
Yeah.
We could just stay here till midnight every night.
I don't think so.
Yeah, they're there.
I think the other option.
I was
maybe-
hoping I'd get a few laughs on that one, because I don't want to do that.
I don't know. I don't see why and Madam Clerk, maybe you or the attorney can answer this for me, if this particular item you want to take out for consideration to the elected body, separate from whatever else you're recommending because you want it voted on sooner, we could always take that item, you all could vote on it and ask us to send it to the commission early. Even if we're not done with the charter review in totality, I don't see why they couldn't send this one particular item forward so that it could get through the election process before the end of the year. Is that, attorney?
What would be the benefit of that, though?
Well, you all, I'm just answering the question. Everybody seemed to want it to be done before the end of the year. So,
That's probably a decision to make as a group as we see how the rest of these meetings progress. It may not come to that, depending on how the rest of these meetings go. I would suggest continue with the meetings, continue through the deliberative process you've been doing, pros, cons, and whys, and then make your recommendation from there. We'll determine how many more meetings we need and when they'll be scheduled based on how the rest of these meetings progress.
yeah, they have a whole schedule already, so, right. So.
But I think knowing, if we're going to go with a special election, I think we need to have that, maybe like a time frame in our mind. Otherwise, what's going to happen is it's going to end up in December,
Right.
which is probably that's not something that we would like to do. But I think if we are thinking about a special election, then we need to have our time frame in within. Doesn't mean that we have to rush through things, but at least knowing that this is the time frame for it.
And there is an election this year. I think Ponce Inlet elects their commissions,
Yes,
but I wouldn't,
November.
it's, when is it? Is it November?
It's November.
So, it's not going to, they obviously, nobody would ever vote in both of those elections, but there is an election this year, so the supervisor elections would be still ratcheting up this year.
How about we do this, if I may make a recommendation? Let staff bring a recommendation back. What I'm hearing is you would like to see, if a special election were to be held for this particular item, you would like to see it held November, okay? So let's say you want to take a discussion, second week of November. If that's what your time frame is you're looking for, let us at your next meeting, we will bring back to you what the drop dead dates would be in order to hit that election. And then you all can look at it and say, okay, yeah, this is where we want to go. I mean, we can back into the dates. Right now, we're all trying to do math in our head. It's getting late. It's not so good. So we could look at it that way, and then that'll be on your next agenda, and we can have that discussion. I think the first thing, though, kind of two parts. One, do you want to take this forward? You need to vote on that. And then second, we will bring back a time frame for you to take it forward before the end of this year and a special election in November.
So my apologies for showing up late. I just want to make sure my thinking is correct. We called a motion, had a second, had discussion, and voted on this topic last time, did we not?
No, this is the special election we're talking about now.
Okay, so we're not talking about the terms?
No, we rediscussed the terms again, had a lengthy discussion, and then a
My
second vote.
apologies.
And they voted on that.
Okay,
Then we
okay.
moved
I
on.
thought we were trying to get that
moved to
piece.
number two.
Okay, okay.
I would try to, I think I would make a motion, or at least for discussion purposes, that the decisions that we make as this body would be effective for the November election. So we would make a decision, our recommendation to the commission would be that they have a special election so that the decisions that are made by this body the commission would have the opportunity to send it to the citizenry this year so that any changes that the citizens and the commission agree would be effective for the 26 election. That would be my hope and desire of this committee.
I'll second that motion.
Who seconded it? Oh, you did, okay.
But I think we need staff to come back with, I think, possibility on a day in November, track 90 days back. So this way you know if this is feasible or not, at least.
Agree.
Well, the worst that could happen, it would slip, and we could slip it to January.
Would we not want to have any of the, let's assume sake of argument, we make 5 recommendations, okay? Would we not want to have all 5 of those on the special election as opposed, is that what we're talking?
Yes, that would,
Okay,
yes.
okay.
Yeah, that's why he made it a kind of a generic, lump all the things together.
Because ultimately, this commission's going to be the ones that make the first recommendation. The citizens are going to be the final arbiter of what,
Yeah, I'm just talking about in terms of our recommendation for a special election, that we're not separating any other items that come up.
Oh, I think that's a separate issue, whether we're both binding them together or separating them out. I think this is just, if whatever decision.
No, I don't mean that way. I mean whether or not, if we.
Oh, okay, yeah, yes. The
If
answer is-
we end up recommending 5 section changes, that all 5 section changes appear on the special election.
Yes, that would be my desire on this motion.
So another quick question. Diana raised a really good point. So if we can't make the November timeframe work for a special election, could there be a special election in February that would still allow things to be changed until in the election 2026?
Yes. Correct. Yes.
So why would we ever want to rush our discussions here to have a November election? Why do we pick a date and work backwards if the commission can have the special election anytime they want?
Well, they can. I think it was just more out of I think typically the elections are held in November because that's when when most of the people are here, that's when the turnouts are usually the highest, I think, in a tradition more than anything. People will be, I think, confused. It's like, oh, there's an election in January.
And I just looked at the dates, we're here every other Tuesday for 2 hours each night, okay? And we've almost worked through 2 of the issues in 2 meetings. So my guess is, even though if we get some other issues raised up, that we'll still be in pretty good shape, probably in the June timeframe. I don't think this will go to August. I can't imagine that there's that many changes. I could be wrong. So I think we'll be in good shape for meeting those deadlines.
I think you're right. I don't think there's any desire by this group to pick apart what was done in 2020. I think a lot of people agree that that was a really well-done process, and I don't think we're up here trying to reinvent the 2020 decisions. I agree with you. I think we're going to come to a pretty quick decision on these few issues that we are bringing up.
And these are big issues that we're talking about, so that does take time.
I'm sorry?
I said, and the issues we've already discussed, have been big issues, so we've had a lot of discussion.
Yeah. I got another area I want to look at, but I don't think it's going to take us a long time because it's not change this, change that. It's a philosophical issue about whether it even belongs there, okay? So I think unless there's other items that come up with this group, we've been making some good progress tonight. I can't see this thing going to August.
I agree.
Given every other Tuesday meeting.
All right. So does everybody know what the motion is on the floor?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
So explain the motion again, please.
Can you read the motions?
I'll have the motion maker give the motion.
Sure. So the idea is the motion would be made to make the recommendations that we as a body come to effective for take effect for the 2026 election cycle, which would require a special election.
And I'll second that.
Mr. Billings, Member Billings seconding the motion. I'll call roll. Member Billings,
Yes. Yes.
Member Fusilier,
Yes.
Member Hathaway,
Yes.
Member Ison.
Yes.
Member Palmer.
Yes.
Member Poole.
Yes.
Member Rashidat.
Yes.
Member Rokier.
I'm going to vote no, again, because of 7.03, and I'm really concerned that we're making an impression to the residents that we're trying to force through an issue, force through an agenda, and you don't need to record that.
Member Wilson.
Yes.
Member Smith.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you.
Motion passes. All right. Okay, so we only have 10 minutes left, but we can begin, I think, we can move on and begin. Well, this one might be pretty easy. The next section is the elections. If you had a chance to read this on starting with page 2, most of this is cleanup of some language there. Obviously, this language is no longer really relevant because this was when everything was changing.
What section
What
are you in?
section? Yeah.
Oh, Article 3, Elections, Section 1, well, Section 3.05.
3.05, okay.
Yeah, page 2 of what was in your packet.
Yep.
Most of that, like I said, is just a structural in
I think it's our
nature.
page 10, actually.
Is it?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
If we're talking about the change that's on the bottom of page 3 of our handout, that's the one we're talking about?
Nomination and election when primary or general elections
Section
unnecessary.
3.05.
Yeah.
Yeah, 3.05, what you just read.
Right, line 109,
Yep.
okay? So I have a question on that. And maybe I'm not reading it right. Is that the same as a 50 plus 1?
So you're looking at the old one. You need to look at the one that she sent by email.
Yeah, you,
The wording that's in there now refers to
Yeah, 3.05 is making it, if the primary winner gets 50% plus one, they're the winner.
okay, and that's what that means there, because it doesn't really say 50 plus 1.
Yeah, it's, right, it's the winner, if the person who gets more votes than both of the others
Okay,
combined.
okay, that's what I want clarification on.
Yeah.
Typically, it's 50% plus one, but not,
Okay.
I guess it's not necessarily always. I guess.
We've both been there.
Yeah. I'm on the losing end every time, for me.
All right, so I'd like to discuss this topic if we can, please. I agree that, as an example, what we experienced the last election, that there was such a wide difference in the number of votes cast that it was kind of silly to go on through to the general election. So I can see where this is headed and the goodness about it. I'm just not sure 50 plus 1 is the right number. So the reason I say that is, you know, in your primary election, you're going to have a much lower turnout than you're going to have for a general election. So I would kind of like to see that threshold just a tad bit higher, like maybe 60%.
And I would tend to agree with you on that, because 50 plus 1 for any one candidate means that 50 minus 1 had voted for a different candidate. So that's why I think it's important to have, you know, that general election where the two top people have the runoff. And I think that's what you're trying to say.
That's
50
what
plus 1 isn't enough, because that means that 50 minus 1 voted for a different candidate.
But if one candidate got like a runaway with it, as happened last time, I don't see any sense in going to the general election. So however we have to word that, but I think just saying that it's just 50% is a little bit too low of a threshold, given the difference in turnout numbers at a primary and general election.
Well, and I was summarizing it. Actually, the language actually says, however, if and when a candidate for mayor or commissioner receives a greater number of votes in said primary election than the combined votes of all other candidates in that particular race, the candidate receiving the majority of all votes cast in said primary shall be declared to be elected. And it shall not be necessary to place his or her name on the ballot for the general election.
So that gives it more.
It's not a number.
Yes.
It's not, it could be 50% plus one, but it could also be, in the case of me, 55% or 77%.
But that's Diana's point, that it could be 50 plus one, and that's kind of what everybody's been talking about. So that's too low of a threshold.
Only because in your general election, you're going to get a much larger turnout than you're going to in your primary.
And I think that was the thought process behind the change in 2020. I just disagree, and having been on the losing end of that vote, I don't think the vote would have been different in the general election, and I think if you see the last two elections, you'll see that was the case.
So we used to have 50 plus one.
I believe that should be the...
So that used to be
yes,
the rule. And when was that changed?
2020. That was just changed.
So the last review committee made that change.
Correct.
To having the runoff.
Yeah. Now,
Okay.
the question is, for Dan, if it's 50 plus one and you say, well, 50 minus one, they didn't vote for. So what happened when they go to the general election and one of them got 51 and one got 49%?
Well, in that case, the one that got 51 would win, right? But if you go to the general election, then you've got more time, you've got a much higher voter turnout. Whoever voted against the 50% plus one, they might get together and say, hey, we want something different, right? It's a vote against the current candidate, right? So I do agree that
But my
that's
point
too
is
low of a
this, if
threshold.
you have three candidates, and so one of them got 51%, the other two combined, they got 49%.
Right, perfect.
So now you're gonna have the highest of the two to go up against the other one for the general election. You're gonna end up, maximum, they're gonna get 49%.
Not necessarily.
No, not necessarily.
You should have a lot more people coming out to vote.
You've got 83%
Dramatic
turnout in a
numbers
general
different.
election versus
Yeah.
30% in a
30.
primary.
Yeah.
So there's a big chance to campaign harder for those two candidates that were finished number 2 and 3. They might have a strong chance of being number one.
I just haven't seen it. Have you seen it?
I can tell you, when I experienced the 50 plus one, that's what it was when I ran way back then. It was not a huge amount, but it was much more than 50 plus one. So as I recall, the difference, I was number 2, and the person that won, I think was like about 250, 300 votes, but there was only like 2,500 votes cast total. So it was more than 50 plus one. It wasn't a giant amount. So I don't know if we can set 60% at all. To me, it's taxing on the candidates. It doesn't go a long way to getting people to run when they have to go do it a second time again after they demonstrate that a majority is looking for them. And I don't know the total distance. If we're talking a presidential term, you probably do have a significant larger number. If you're talking about the off-year election, probably less in terms of it. You look what just happened in the special election down there, and it was not a gigantic turnout, but it was a single election for one district, and in a predominantly one-party area. So I think that the majority here is written, and maybe you can say difference of something. I don't know. I don't know how you can make it better. You're never going to be perfect. But I think you have to somehow eliminate requiring somebody to go run again when they've demonstrated a majority of people want them in the office.
I would ask, and I agree with the gentleman's comments, do we have the data from other municipalities? Is 50 plus one standard? Is it common? We've looked at other municipalities for various, if it's common and it's something that others do, could we not benchmark what similar
Or
size?
Susan, your experience, what have you seen?
I think it's pretty... microphone. I think it's pretty common, 50 plus one, but, we have 400 and some odd cities in this state, so everybody has their own little quirks. So I wouldn't say there's a blanket out there.
I was looking for a different reason at the other charters in Volusia County. I did pull all the charters for all the cities in Volusia County, so I can go back and look at that, or we can ask staff to take a look at that. I didn't particularly look at that in that. I was looking for something else.
I think staff could make a survey.
Do we need to vote to extend the meeting, or are we allowed to just continue on?
I say we end with this topic, maybe give staff some direction. We can bring back information on what is common in Volusia County or wherever you want to look on how they do that for runoff elections. I don't know the answer, so, I mean, I would have to look it up regardless.
I'm
but we
pretty
can do
confident
that.
we're the only ones in Volusia County that do this.
No, everybody has some.
It's odd that the top two go to November regardless of the vote. I think that's pretty unique to New Smyrna. But I won't speak for all the other cities.
So
There's a lot of unique things out there, so, as you well know, but,
it would help me if we could then ask staff, given the hour, to pull the information for Volusia County so we could look at it. And if it is common to be 51, then I'm comfortable with us being common as it pertains to this.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely don't like like what happened last time. I didn't see any sense in that at all, and I'm willing to go along with the consensus of the group if that's something that's common across all the cities. I just thought it was a little bit low of a threshold.
Do we need a motion to request that information, or
No,
may I
no.
just ask for it and we can look at it?
you can just
next-
ask for it.
Okay,
We'll
thank
look
you.
at it and bring it back.
Thank you.
I think, so with that, we'll stop where we are. I just want a couple quick things from you. So obviously, we still have a few more things to cover under the preliminary recommendations to date to dealing with the charter revisions. We didn't get through all of them that the city attorney had drafted, so we'll pick up where we left off for the next meeting. But just in case, by some miracle, we get through all of that at the next meeting, we do have a couple of other items that have been brought to our attention for future charter discussion, which is the discussion about a special election, I can't say that word now, sustainability, that's Article 6. That has to do with stewardship, environmental stewardship and historic preservation. And then I did not know if we have any other charter articles that you would like to target for review or discussion. If you do, please let me know or let the city clerk know, and she will forward it on to me so that we have those things in our back pocket ready to go. If we get through everything at the next meeting, we can keep moving.
Thank you, Susan.
All righty. Anything else that anybody wants to bring forward? All right, hearing none from anybody, thank you all very much for your time this evening, and we'll see you 2 weeks. Thank you. Meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Happy Easter.
Oh, happy Easter.